Slavery. When most people think of that word, they think of early American slavery. They think of the names such as Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Toussaint Louverture, or the enslavement of Africans and native peoples on American soil. Maybe they think of the Indian Ocean slave trade, or even the Barbary slave trade. All people and events rooted in the depths of history. But what about the modern day? What about the name Kidan? What about Aman? What about Mukir Mintyarba? Who thinks of their names? Who thinks of their lives?
In 1834, the first big steps to abolition took place when the British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world at the time, outlawed slavery. And since then, gradual emancipation brought slavery to be criminalized throughout the world. However, these laws do not mean that slavery has since become non-existent. Millions around the world today still suffer under the oppressive institution known as modern-day slavery, especially in the continent of Africa. Since freed from the shackles of European colonization, many still find themselves victims of forced labor and trafficking. In fact, Africa is home to nations with some of the highest rates for slavery. Notably, 3 countries: Eritrea, Mauritania, and South Sudan.
Eritrea is a small nation in the Horn of Africa. For every 1,000 Eritreans, 90.3 of them live in slavery. It has been plagued by the institution of forced labor in the extensive mining sector, specifically in the Bisha mines in the north of the nation near the capital Asmara. There, men work all day, digging for gold, zinc, and copper, facing physical torture and beatings. The mines are owned by the Canadian Nevsun Resources, a mining company based out of British Columbia. In 2014, a lawsuit was filed against the company by several Eritreans who faced manual labor and abuse at Bisha. One of these men was Aman. Aman was conscripted into the Eritrean army when he was only 20 years old. "It devoured my youth," Aman said. He was forced to work at Sigan, an Eritrean construction firm. There he worked to build the mines and later worked as an administrator at Bisha for 5 years in grueling conditions. Life was very harsh. There were sandstorms 24 hours a day. The temperature was 38 degrees Celsius, or 40 degrees Celsius. We never had full stomachs. My work was constant. He was forced to live and work there against his will, being denied the right to leave, even to tend to his sick wife. Aman escaped in 2014 to Europe, finally leaving behind enslavement. Kidan was a security guard at the mines between 2007 and 2013. He was forced to work excruciating shifts that paid not enough money for a bar of soap. He, too, was also denied the right to leave to attend his father's funeral services, and when he did leave without permission, he had to go into hiding for 4 months. When he was found, he was imprisoned for 2 more months. Aman and Kidan aren't the only ones who suffered, though. Bisha has been plagued by these accounts, and numerous others that all tell similar stories of abuse, torture, imprisonment, and excruciating conditions. In 2020, the case was heard in the Canadian Supreme Court, and settlements for undisclosed amounts were worked out for the plaintiffs. The case is a landmark for future cases involving slavery, trafficking, and child labor across the world.
Mauritania is a former French colony on the west coast of Africa in the Sahara Desert. In Mauritania, for every 1,000 people, 32 are currently living in slavery. While Mauritania abolished slavery in 1981, it wasn't enforced properly. It was not until the year 2007 that slavery was criminalized formally. As of 2012, 10 to 20% of Mauritania's 3.4 million people are enslaved in real slavery. This was obtained by a UN report on forms of contemporary slavery. Slavery in modern-day Mauritania is just as brutal and just as inhumane as it was hundreds of years ago. Mukir Mintyarba, who was born into slavery, recounts how after tending to the goats of her master, she returned to his home to find that her toddler had been left outside to die. She stated that she was like an animal living with animals. In Mauritania, groups targeted include the Haitian, the Hapular, the Soninke, and the Wolof minorities, groups that are all ethnically black. The Arab Berber populations are mainly responsible for this enslavement, including Quranic teachers. Slaves in Mauritania also originate from sub-Saharan Africa. The nation is a stopover for many ships on their way to Europe, and migrants that dock at the ports of Nouadhibou find themselves victims of sex trafficking. The government has not had a significant response to this, according to the U.S. Department of State, and in some cases, the government feeds the machine. Women who have become victims of sex trafficking can oftentimes find themselves subject to charges of zina, or sex outside of marriage, with little to no help from the government programs. South Sudan is another country that has been significantly torn apart by modern-day slavery. South Sudan, while a relatively new nation in the international community, dating back to only 2011, the history of slavery in the nation goes back way further. In 1989, when South Sudan was part of Sudan, a coup was launched by Omar al-Bashir, the leader of the NIF. The NIF, standing for the National Islamic Front, was an Islamist extremist group that refused to see any rights or sovereignty granted to the ethnically black regions of southern Sudan. The NIF raided these black majority areas, killing innocent men and kidnapping women and children. Those kidnapped were forced into slavery in some cases, sent across the country, and forced into new families and given new Muslim names. Their identities were forever changed.
Even to this day, with South Sudan as an independent nation, an estimated 115,000 South Sudanese still live in slavery as of 2022. Currently, for every 1,000 Sudanese, 10.3 of them live in slavery. The South Sudanese Civil War caused massive tarnish to the government and institutions, and anti-slavery and anti-child labor laws are not enforced strictly. According to the United States Department of State, the response by the government of South Sudan to trafficking, slavery, and child labor has been abysmal. Punishments and penalties have been less than adequate, with only 2 years of imprisonment for forced labor charges and no real laws against adult sex trafficking to this day.